Do you want to do like, you'll do an intro later, right? To just say,
Yeah, blah, blah,
I just
blah.
got it. Blah, blah, blah.
Welcome to Lead the Way with Anna Gouker. Your guide, Anna Gouker, is on a quest of her own to find effective ways of creating change and inclusion in our communities. You have come to the right place if you believe in truth, justice, and coffee. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, this is Lead the Way, and I'm Anna Gouker. Today is a very special and for me, very unusual episode. As some of you may know, I recently came out with a book called Don't Ask Permission to Fly. It's a collection of essays about my life, observations about the world, and some of the people who have influenced me the most. My intention throughout the writing process was to be as honest and vulnerable as possible about my struggles as well as my determination to develop a strong sense of self in a world that has tried and tried and tried to tell me who I am and what my life is supposed to look like. I know this is not a unique struggle. Hopefully, I did my job and the book will be helpful to other people on a journey of self-discovery. Because of the book release, we decided for one time only to turn the interview tables on me. One of my dearest friends, Rachel Hermes, agreed to do this interview. It's something we've talked about for a really long time. Rachel is extremely smart and thoughtful, and I was so excited to be able to do this with her. Full disclosure, she did not give me her questions ahead of time. I don't know if you'll be able to tell from my voice, but I was also very nervous. Sometimes the people I'm closest to make me the most nervous. I also want to give my conversation with Rachel a little more context. I don't talk much about my disability on this podcast because I'm often focused on learning about each of our guests. It was before my first birthday that I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease called spinal muscular atrophy. It's a genetic condition that causes progressive deterioration of the muscles throughout the body. At that time, doctors told my parents that I would not likely live past age 2. Obviously, we know how that prediction turned out. This is just one example of how I have defied expectations and pushed back when others have tried to tell me who I am and what I can do. But we will talk about this and a whole lot more. Without further ado, this is my recent conversation with my good friend, Rachel Hermes.
Anna, I'm very excited about this. I thought I would first start out just by reminding you how we met each other.
Oh,
In the summer of 1997 at Muscular Dystrophy Summer Camp. I think I was 15, which would have made you how old?
I think I was 11 when we met, but I
Okay.
don't really know. I'm not going to calculate. How far apart are we in age? I've never
Well,
checked.
I'm 39 and you're about to turn what?
35.
Okay, so that must have been right. 15 and
Yeah.
11. Okay.
Puke.
No, that's great. So, and as you know, I am an avid podcast fan of yours and have thought that there needed to be more Anna on the podcast. And so I appreciate that you are letting me flip the script and ask you some questions today.
Yeah, and I really can't wait until Lead the Way ventures outside Wisconsin and I can do this to you. So that's
I
the
was just
future.
saying, so since 1997, I've been storing up some of these questions.
Oh.
So this is my time. So first, just for people who may not know, can you share a bit of your background? Where did you grow up? And then how did you end up in the Madison, Wisconsin area?
I grew up in a small town in northern Illinois, 40 minutes adjacent to your small town in a cornfield. And yeah, I had a really good childhood in that area. It was really a special situation because I lived in a small town. I was able to have a unique arrangement with the school district. So I was technically homeschooled all through elementary school and high school, and I would go to the classroom as much as I could, but was also allowed to do my homework and schoolwork mostly from home. So I think you were definitely a source of keeping me hip and in the know of what was happening, as well as all of my avid television watching growing up, Saved by the Bell and Friends primarily. So then after that, I got my bachelor's in psychology and approaching graduation with that, had a real panic of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What's happening? I'm not going to be in school for once in my life. Where am I headed? What's happening next? And one of my assistants at the time decided she was going to be getting her master's in something called rehab counseling. And that's something I had not even heard of before. But as she was talking about it, she said that it is a discipline focused on disability and assisting people with moving towards their personal, professional goals. So I looked into that and found out that UW-Madison had the top program in the country, which at that moment I was also contemplating moving to Madison, Wisconsin, just coincidentally. So in that climax situation, I was like, it's a sign. This is meant to be. I'm supposed to move to Madison, and I'm supposed to go into rehab counseling, and I made the decision very interestingly. I don't know. I just kind of went for it and put everything in motion and headed for the border.
So Anna, that gives me a sense of why you initially moved to Madison, but why have you stayed? And how many years has it been since you started your program and moved there?
That's a good question. I mean, I've been here for about 10 years now, which feels like 5 minutes and a century all at the same time. I can't believe all of the adventures and opportunities I've had in the time I've been here. I think I've stayed because, I mean, there's so much ambition in Wisconsin. I feel like it's sort of like on the outside, people don't realize how much is going on, but there's so much drive of people to bring in new things and innovative approaches that Wisconsin's just kind of the place to be.
Great. Well, I also am curious, so as this is a podcast that focuses mainly on people and organizations in Madison until you expand outside Madison, I wanted to also ask about a few questions about your involvement in the Madison community. So I remember when you first moved there and lived on, what street did you live on? It was very hip.
Willie Street?
Yeah, Willie Street. Cool, like co-ops and bars and things. So I remember when you first moved there, you volunteered at a homeless shelter. And I remember you saying you really felt a connection to some of the clients, and wondered if you could share a little more about that.
Yeah, I remember just out of grad school, I really, really wanted to work with that population in some capacity. It was pretty devastated numerous times when I did not get the job. Yeah, there was one, I applied there twice, and yeah, whatever, it's fine. I'm over it. But I really felt like that was my destiny for a minute, because I did feel like, I mean, we all know that mental health and homelessness can be related in some ways and for some people, and that we need to be addressing these issues. But I feel like as I learn more about homelessness in the Madison community specifically, and the more that I just noticed how many people were affected by a lack of a place to live, it just seemed like one of the issues that anyone can help with is just acknowledging that someone exists and that they're going through something and they're having some painful experience. And if you come across a homeless person, and even if you don't want or can't contribute some money, just saying hello and making eye contact to me is such an important thing that anyone can do, and so many people avoid doing because you don't want to maybe feel like a jerk, or you don't want to do the wrong thing, or maybe you feel like you're not doing enough no matter what you do, so you just gotta avoid a person altogether. And I think that facet in particular is something that affects people with disabilities a lot of the time as well, that people don't know if something is right or wrong and how to best interact with a person with a disability, so they just avoid you altogether, which I'd say doesn't help anybody. So there you go.
Yeah. It's funny because I know the listeners can't see this, but your Chihuahua Coco is popping up onto the screen down there, and it reminds me of what you just said. And when you first got the dog and would have it on your wheelchair as you were moving around town, and then it became a talking point with strangers that usually wouldn't look at you or would look away, or
Right.
and that it was kind of a cool thing to have this tiny Chihuahua to connect with people, because you have experienced, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so much of people walking past you or just staring at you. So that's really interesting, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It was like, Coco was like a point of entry. Like, hi, I'm a human. I'm not a spectacle, and I do exist. So.
And then, something else that stands out to me from your Madison time is, of course, a couple years ago, you running for Dane County Board. Can you share a little bit what motivated you to do that? Or I also remember you said it was good that you didn't know what it would have entailed. Otherwise, you might not have had the gumption to do it. So maybe what you didn't know that motivated you to do it.
That's another instance where I was at a crossroads and I was leaving my first job at that very moment, and I didn't have a plan for what would be next, and just kind of in that adrenaline rush time, I was like, oh, there happens to be a seat opening up on the Dane County Board in my district. This is what I'm going to do with my time right now. Not look for a job. I'm going to run for Dane County Board and see where that takes me. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I really came out of left field with the local political scene and was not super embraced by party politics, but it was still a really good experience. And I think that if I were to run for something again, now I know the importance of having a designated team set up in advance and not just thinking I was going to do this whole thing on my own and figure it out along the way. It's good to have those people in place first and the whole structure set up ahead of time. But the fun thing was going out and knocking doors with you and meeting new people and having conversations and learning more about my neighbors who I had never met before. And that really made me love this area that much more.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm curious, do you feel like people took you seriously as a candidate when you were moving around and going door to door and talking to neighbors and hosting events as a first-time candidate, or perhaps as a young woman, or perhaps as a woman with a disability?
I think so. I mean, I think generally when people meet me, they don't know what to think of me. They don't know. Like, is she joking? Is she serious? Like, should I be uncomfortable right now?
She's just being sassy, everyone, all the time.
So I feel like my being in a wheelchair helped people. It helped in that people like sat up a little more, had to try a little harder to understand what I was saying, so then they're listening a little more intently as well, which I liked. And that was good. I think people I met as I was going through neighborhoods and handing out flyers and things. They were all really welcoming. And people were generally in those settings like just excited, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, you're running, great. And that was super fun. Yeah, so I think, but I mean, yeah, the whole trying to get the endorsement of the Democratic Party, that was a different scenario. They were not so, I don't know, I just think that when I first turned in my paperwork to run, I thought people would just be excited and that it would be all about serving the community and people coming together to solve things for each other. And I think that that's what the voters want, and that's not always what's happening behind the scenes.
Well, I credit you with introducing me to walking tacos. That was great at one of your fundraisers.
Yeah.
But I also, my memory from that time is a photo that I think was texted to me of you sitting, and you'll have to provide the actual context and details, sitting with a table of about 19 or 20 older white men. I don't know if it was a debate or you were getting to pitch something, but it was one of those like depictions of you need diversity at the table, diversity and inclusion, and you were the diversity and inclusion at that table. Do you remember that at all? Am I remembering this accurately?
You're talking about a photo?
A photo, I mean, but the actual thing happened.
I think that was a public forum. So it was like anyone running for county board in any district went to this public forum, and I think everyone had 3 opportunities to talk. There was like 2 questions, and then there was like the, I guess, opening and closing statements. And that was crazy, because that was like the Madison Public Library, and there were not a ton of people there, but there were people there, and I was in the front, and I just remember thinking like in my job, I was in my office, with my caregiver every day, didn't go out much, didn't have time to meet a lot of people in my spare time, because I was always getting ready for work or getting ready for bed. And so it was just like all of a sudden I was in front of people, and I had to teach people how to pronounce my name and like act like I was super confident, which I was not. I was terrified. So, but
well, I always think it's good that you're on those panels or at the table. It's good that your voice is out there, and that's why I really like your podcast and having you asking questions to other people from your perspective. And so I'm curious now, shifting gears a bit, what motivated you to start this podcast? And if you could talk a little bit about if it's achieving what you had intended when you originally conceived of the idea.
Well, it's all a blur after the campaign ended, actually, because I know I started the podcast after I finished the campaign, and I didn't know what was next. Obviously, I also didn't have a job at that time, so I lost the election, still didn't have a job, and had no plan, and I don't really recall a lot about what went into the decision to move forward with the podcast. I just remember having a conversation with one of my caregivers, and she brought it up and was like, you're really good at like engaging, having conversations with people, and you do so many interviews for hiring caregivers, and that is like something I could do in my sleep at this point. And sometimes I am probably asleep a little bit when I'm doing that. And so it was just like one conversation that she brought it up, and I don't think she even realizes she planted that idea in my head, and I kind of was like, oh, huh. And then I just started doing it, and I switched the Facebook page from my campaign to a podcast, and really felt like even though the campaign didn't lead to what the ultimate goal was, I felt like I was a good person to continue this journey with other people on what makes an effective leader, and helping to show others that you don't have to be someone who's been told their whole life that they're meant to be in charge in order to have a meaningful contribution and have that unique touch that the world needs.
I don't think I ever fully realized that transition and how the podcast grew out of not getting on the Dane County board and reflecting on what was going on at that time. But that's, lemons out of lemonade.
I just remember finishing
lemonade out of lemon. Sorry, got that.
Disqualified. I just remember finishing the campaign and feeling so motivated at that time, like realizing there's so much I don't understand about the world and other people's experiences. And that's really what I wanted. Was I don't know if I'll run for anything ever again, but I really want to understand the world better and other people's lives better and history better. I deliberately did not take any history classes in college because I knew that it would slow me down, because my entire focus during my education was getting the best grade possible, and I did not care so much about learning, because I just always assumed I would be dead soon or something. So I just felt like this race against time growing up. I have to get done with school so that I can change the world really fast. And school is slowing me down. And then being on the campaign trail, realizing I'm in my 30s, which I never thought would happen, and I don't understand enough about a lot of things because I felt like so rushed through school and I did not pay attention very well. But I can do a multiple choice test with the best of them in my sleep, literally, and get a really good grade. And that's what I got out of my education.
Now you're revisiting history, I know, through what's the podcast you listen to about the speeches that you really like?
It Was Said by John Meacham.
Yeah. Well, now you're getting the education from John Meacham
Exactly.
that you
Exactly.
getting undergrad. And so yeah, so that's an interesting journey and reason for seeking out certain people in Madison to understand what was their journey to leadership and what's their background and how are they changing the community. So do you feel like your conversations with them are achieving what you intended, either personally or what you wanted to put out there for others?
Yeah, I feel like the best part of the podcast has been meeting a lot of people, especially during the pandemic when I don't leave very much. I leave sometimes, just not a lot. I got my vaccine, so I left twice for that. And so, I don't have to feel as isolated as I would if I was not doing a podcast. And I'm able to connect with more people and learn from more people and get new ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise. So in that way, I feel like I'm, really getting a lot out of it.
Early on, you did a three-part series on criminal justice. What was the impetus behind that, or your fascination with criminal justice system and learning more about that?
Yeah, the restorative justice
Oh, yes,
series, I
thank you.
think.
Yeah,
Um,
restorative.
I didn't know a lot about it, and I think when we did one interview for that, then I realized that there were different perspectives that needed to be included, and that we could probably do a whole separate podcast on criminal justice, and that would be a very important thing to do. I just think that criminal justice is something that I'm very interested in, and it, in my mind, ties in with the homelessness issue that I was talking about earlier and feeling a kinship with people who experience that in being a segment of the population that people don't want to look closely at. So I like to dive into those areas.
And I was also curious, you've interviewed a couple people, I think, related to the Black Lives Matter movement and wondered what resonated with you about that movement. And I wonder if that also, just in thinking about your desire to better understand history, if that factors into it as well.
Yeah, I think that we all realized last summer, or maybe, you know a lot of stuff, so I don't know if you were having this same realization, but I realized that there was a lot I didn't understand about other people's experiences, and I needed to explore that further. And I think we're going to continue to have some difficult conversations in this country, and that's something that we want to explore in the podcast as best as we can, and having conversations with the right leaders in that area is really important.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you on the desire and understanding my own gaps and in recognizing other people's experiences. And I think that's a good segue into my next set of questions, which is about your book of essays that I think are really illuminating about how you've moved through the world as Anna Gouker, as a young woman with a disability. That I think I really appreciated about the book of essays and why I've gifted it to a number of people is because that is a view of moving through the world that not a lot of people have. In the way that also, we want to look at how other people experience the world. So I was just curious if you can share a little bit about what's it about and who do you hope reads the book and what do you want them to take away from it?
It's a three-part question. Okay.
I'll circle back to the ones you don't
Okay.
answer.
I know. So the book. The book is about my take on the world and some of the experiences I've had. A little bit about certain people who have impacted me a lot and different observations I've made about my life. I think that the title, Don't Ask Permission to Fly, I came up with that before I started writing the book. I'm not really sure how that happened. Just kind of happened. Same thing with the podcast. I came up with a good title, then I decided it was a good idea to pursue it. So
One strategy.
that's my process. So I got excited about the title because I think that something everyone goes through throughout their lives and something I feel like I experience on a more heightened level is the struggle of figuring out who you are as a unique individual and how you fit in the world and how your relationship with the outside world can impact you a lot. And I think that it is essential that we look inward and explore and cultivate our skills and explore our uniqueness and celebrate all that we have to offer. And too often, there's a temptation to incorporate the feedback you're getting from other people, and that can shape you and how you see yourself. And my mission is to help more people celebrate their unique qualities and grow in their own development without allowing an intrusion of voices into their heads of who they think they're supposed to be. Did that answer anything?
Yes, that answered a lot of things.
Okay.
Well, what really jumped out to me was the feedback you're getting from other people, because in your book, there's a couple essays about how other people see you and what those messages you were getting as a little girl. There was a woman at the local, well, I guess this one wasn't when you were a little girl, but one when you were a little girl, women at a summer festival coming up and asking to pray over you, pray for you, and you feeling like an object of pity. And the same thing happening in a coffee shop when you were in graduate school, somebody wanting to pray for you because of your condition. And I'm curious because that feedback didn't actually inform how you see yourself. Or maybe it did a bit, but what was the turning point? And at what point did you figure out that you don't see yourself in the same way that some of these random strangers did?
Let's see. Well, I think that pity quality is kind of built into a lot of our support services as well. And the fact that I think that there's so many different ways I am given the message that because I have a disability, I am supposed to, like, quotes, supposed to be at home, and I obviously don't have a lot going on. I'm supposed to be available all the time and be home for people to deliver equipment or repair something or check on my ventilator and fill out their paperwork and check their boxes. And I think that I don't really know how I can say I resisted that, but I think that if people can realize how all of that adds up, let alone being out in the world and interacting with people and having them automatically shower you with pity and woe is you. I mean, I don't know when that shifted for me. I know being little, I definitely liked attention, and I didn't care what form of attention I got. There's like a home video of the camera on me and me looking around, and like my mom and dad are like busy doing things, and I'll be like, Mom, take a picture of me. And I remember asking her, this is not a video, asking her at one point, like, well, why don't we want people to feel sorry for us? Like, that seems good, right? Like, because in my tiny 5-year-old brain, it's like, that's like attention. And we like the attention, right? That's good. So I don't know when that shifted. I just know that I was told by my parents growing up that I was unique and gifted and had a lot to offer, and I should never shy away from that and always be giving back in some way, whether I'm volunteering or working or whatever it is. It didn't have to be a specific thing in their minds. My mom never pushed me to get the perfect grades or be valedictorian or anything. She just wanted me to try and never sell myself short for what I had to give back. And when you see yourself as someone who has gifts to offer, then it gets really annoying after a while when people are telling you, like, oh, like, so sorry about your terrible life. And so I think that there's just that ongoing friction. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that your mom's gaze and seeing what she's, all of your capabilities is much more powerful than the system you describe that sort of has pity as an underpinning assumption that anyone with a disability is to be pitied, as opposed to looking at how your mom gazes upon you with this, what are you going to do next? What do you got to offer?
Right. And I think that, someone was just asking me why I'm so convinced I have a purpose in life. Like, no, it wasn't supposed to be like a rude thing. It was just like, well, what is it, and why do you think that? Why are you so sure? I just feel like so strongly that there's been too many coincidences in my life that have added up. I mean, my mom worked in a nursing home as a really young person before I or my brother showed up. And she worked in a nursing home where there were kids with disabilities, and their parents, even 2 college professors, dropped their kids off and said, like, we don't know what to do with them, and just left them at this nursing home where my mom worked, and older people in the community would volunteer and hold these children. And, my mom had that experience as a young person, knowing she would not want that for her kids, and she didn't understand how people could do that. And then coincidentally going into special education, and she just happened to get a degree where later she could be paid by our hometown school district to be my teacher, and I could be homeschooled and also go into the classroom when possible. There's just been too many things in my life that have given me a unique perspective, but also elevated my way of seeing myself. And I think that there's a lot of people with disabilities who don't have that persistent mother and father who tell them you need to give the world what you have to offer. And in my first job, the thing that we talked about a lot is that, there's a lot of things that affect employment for people with disabilities, and the employment rate is really low for people with disabilities. But the thing that we were talking about all the time was the fact that if someone with a disability was going to go to college or get a job after high school, they needed to be told by someone important to them, whether it was a parent or a teacher or a social worker or someone significant and close to them, needed to be there throughout their childhood saying, this is the expectation. This is the expectation you should have for yourself, and this is what you have to offer, and you should not ignore that. And that doesn't happen very often because not many people have that expectation for people with disabilities. Therefore, if someone's not told that while their brain is young and developing, then it's not likely that graduation's going to come and they're going to have that light bulb moment in adulthood and see themselves in a way that I think is so important, not only for them, but the world, to have them as a part of it.
I agree. Again, the image of you at the table with a lot of people that don't look like you. I think that's really powerful and fascinating. And do you think enough people have that message? Do you think enough, is that infused into support groups for parents who have children with disabilities? Is that something that's taught to you during your master's? Is that something that was, is that talked about, or is that more, in my experience, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm talking to others anecdotally, and this is what I'm seeing? Or, how do you get that message out, that this is something to inculcate into the culture of children with disabilities and families of children with disabilities and the school teachers of children with disabilities and classmates, so all of us?
I don't know. And anytime I hear someone use the word inculcate, I think, why don't I use that word more? Such a good word. I don't know. I think it definitely is going against the grain to preach everything I just said, because even, we met at summer camp for an organization that I think really perpetuates this pity model. And I went to this summer camp my whole childhood, and it was really important to me, but I think that in order to keep funding coming in, they realized that they raised so much more money when they would show these sad little kids that needed their disability wiped away, and that doesn't help. And there's a lot, it brings in so much more money to show that sad image than it does to show a kid as a powerful individual who's going to grow up and make a big impact. That really does not make you want to reach out and get your digital checkbook or whatever. So I don't know. I think that it's a real challenge, and it requires teachers challenging their own assumptions about their students, and it requires people I just think that the more we can reach out and be friendly to each other and make a connection with more people and not let our assumptions dictate all of our actions, the more that people will have conversations and elevate each other. That's my only idea.
Well, I'm hopeful that your book of essays is a prompt for that and starts those conversations. And should the world be in a place in a couple months or a year that a speaking tour for you can happen about the book, I hope that that's a conversation starter. And that does bring me back to one of my original questions where I told you I'd circle back. Who do you hope reads this book?
Everyone. That's who I hope reads it. Okay. Because, we became involved in the foster care system a little bit a couple of years ago, right after my campaign ended, actually. My mom was like, surprise, we have a new friend. So I dedicated my book to somebody really important to us, and it was really because I felt like this person is the future, and I think that for a lot of the vulnerable kids out there, people with disabilities or not, you're really shaped by the expectations of those around you, and that if we can help each other see what's best in ourselves and focus on that and not the haters, then I think that our whole society will be for the better. So that's what I'm hoping, is that the person that I dedicated the book to will be kind of a model for the people I want to read and really absorb the book. But not just that, I want teachers and nurses and everyone that's important in helping to hold our society together to be part of that too.
Yeah, that all makes sense. You mentioned you hope nurses read the book. One of my favorite essays was your experience with dental surgery. And even though I know what happens, as I'm reading the essay, I had sweaty hands and a racing heart, wondering how it was going to turn out. So I wonder if you could share a bit about that experience and what you hope the reader takes away from a story like that.
So that essay was about when I had my wisdom teeth taken out, which my brother, who's older than me, had his taken out maybe 8 years before. And so I went with the same team at the same place because my brother had such a good experience. We assumed everything would go smoothly as it did for him, and it did not go smoothly. As I describe in the essay, the anesthesiologist, well, we had both decided he would intubate me through my nose so that they would have more room to work in my mouth, which I thought was also a really good idea, and I fully supported the plan. Unfortunately, the tube to intubate me did not fit up my nose, and I am assuming that was the only thing they had handy at the time, and he didn't want to cancel everything. I don't know why they didn't inform my family in the waiting room when they realized the tube wasn't fitting up my nose. They did not notify anyone or ask for any input or guidance on how to proceed. Instead, they just kept trying to jam it up my nose for 2 hours, one side and then the other side. And I was kind of in and out of consciousness in like a twilight. And I kept telling them when I would wake up that I couldn't breathe. I had like something was in my lungs, and since the numbers on their equipment said that I was doing fine, they didn't think anything was wrong. So they just continued and kept ignoring me until eventually my sats dropped and everything got really scary for a bit. And meanwhile, they were telling my family that everything was fine and is doing great. You don't need to see her right now. She's just really groggy. You'll see her a little later. And that was also a very different situation from my brother, because when he had his wisdom teeth taken out, as soon as he was out of the operating room and went into the recovery room, my mom was able to meet him in the recovery room with all of the equipment he might need for breathing and anything like that. And for my surgery, they wouldn't let her in the recovery room. She tried to sneak in. They escorted her out, and her and my brother were trying to like track me down in the hospital, and the nurses grabbed her by the arms and said, "Come out this way." And so I had to be in the hospital for a few days, and I ended up losing a tooth on the bottom front because when they had the emergency intubate me, they removed the tooth just ahead of time to make room for intubation. So that was a surprise also that they did not tell us about till I woke up and I looked in the mirror. I was like, what is happening? So that was, I'd say, a bad experience.
Yeah, and I recall that the moral of the story is that you also deserve to be listened to.
Right.
And
Yeah.
wondering, and I guess it's all conjecture, but had it been somebody else with a more forceful voice, or perhaps that wasn't dependent on others for physical movement, would they have been more apt to listen? But again, just conjecture.
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of become a central element of healthcare in a lot of hospitals is that the staff are the experts and they tell the patient that the patient is the expert on themselves, which really gets at me actually when doctors are telling you that you're the expert and they don't believe what they're saying, but they have to say it to make you feel at ease. That really gets under my skin. But I think that, it's just kind of a fact that I could feel that I was having trouble breathing a lot earlier than their machines were picking up on it. And if they had listened to me, it would not have escalated into an emergent situation where they had to intubate me and have me intubated for a day and a half or something and stay in the hospital for a couple of days. That was not necessary. But they did not want to relinquish control of the situation.
It's funny you emphasize the word listening, because that's a hallmark to me of your personality, your ability to listen and your keen observation skills. I imagine that's something that's just what you've honed by moving through the world. You really do excel at listening, Anna, remembering what people said. And as your friend, I can tell you that you don't shy away from pulling punches in your questions. So you can say, yeah, but 7 years ago you said this, so now I'm asking this. And so I'm just curious, how did you become like that?
I think my brother's a lot like that also. So it's probably genetic.
Yes,
actually.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a genetic thing. I'm sure my dad is partly involved in that.
Okay, well, just wrapping up with a couple of questions, and I'm curious about what's giving you hope today and what's breaking your heart and keeping you up at night. I'm going to ask them both together in case there's a preference for answering one first.
Hope. I'm definitely going to think of something really good at like midnight tonight. I'll be like, oh, I should have said this thing I heard about.
You've got editing power over this podcast.
I know, I'll probably cut this whole thing out. So, yeah, I think hope. It's nothing in politics, that's for sure. Nothing about our politics right now makes me hopeful. I think that the thing that I've noticed, that I'm sure everyone is noticing, is that we cannot depend on our political leaders to actually be leaders. They are not leaders, they are followers. And it's just become so apparent that it's regular people who don't have a blue check mark next to their name on Twitter, regular people who own small businesses, who pick up garbage and go about their lives in a responsible way that usually means that they don't make headlines. I think that those are people who know how to get stuff done and will reach out to their neighbors and make sure that they have heat or let them in if they don't have heat. They will open up their businesses in a way that helps the whole community in a time of crisis, and just do what needs to be done. Do the right thing. And we've seen that in the crisis in Texas with lack of heat, with the weather. I just think that that's what gives me hope, is just knowing that American people are still generally doing the right thing. What was your other question?
It's what's breaking your heart and keeping you up at night?
Ugh. Everything else, actually. I don't know, I think... Oh, I forgot. Anthony Fauci. He also gives me hope. Yeah.
Great.
I watch everything I can whenever he's on TV, because I feel like he is someone who just does his job. He doesn't have any secret aspirations or Nike deals he's trying to get. He just does the work, says what he knows, and doesn't betray that ever. And I feel like that is a really unique quality, especially for someone in such a high level position. Breaking my heart. Obviously, what we saw this week in Texas fits that qualification. I've never been so grateful to have working heat before. It's just one of those things you don't really think about all that often. You just have it until you don't, and then you realize actually how fragile that our conveniences are. So that was a real wake-up call for sure. But I think what's breaking my heart the most is the fact that we find ourselves in a time when it seems like political conversations or politics is part of everything. So if we don't agree with someone on their politics, then we see them as less than human and not worthy, and that really erodes society in a steady way. And I think that it's kind of getting worse and worse. And also, this tendency I've noticed throughout the last year, where it feels like people come to a conclusion about a topic or a person, and then they look for reasons to justify that conclusion rather than doing the opposite and looking at the facts and the evidence and then coming to a conclusion. I think that people just have a bad habit right now of seeing the world from their own vantage point and being really stuck in that and looking for reasons to justify whatever they want.
What are your thoughts on how we get out of that?
I really like podcasts. And I think that more people need to make sure. I think I heard someone else talk recently about having people in your life who you feel like you may have different opinions and come to different conclusions about certain issues, but you trust that person's integrity and reasoning. So having those people that you listen to who you don't agree with, but you know have a really good ability to think critically and analyze a situation in a credible way, without like making excuses for what they want to see in a situation, something like that. I think that's really important. But I just mentioned the podcast thing because I think it's a really easy way to have a different perspective streamed into your daily routine. So like listening to people who you don't really agree with, but you really think have a valid way of approaching an issue.
Any podcasts you'd recommend right now?
If you need a liberal perspective, then Political Gabfest is a good one that I listen to fairly regularly. And if you need to add a little conservative into your daily or weekly routine, Megyn Kelly.
Well, Anna, thank you for those recommendations, and thank you for humoring me and taking time to answer my questions and chat with me and let me probe a bit further into some things that are on the surface. Any final words or thoughts you want to share, or things that I didn't ask about that you wish I would have?
No, I think that Coco's done, so this is
Sure,
perfect
your
timing.
Chihuahua dog has just climbed back onto the screen, has let you know.
Yeah, time's up. Perfect timing.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this.
Well, I loved it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear what comes out of this.
Thank you so much to my friend Rachel. I had a lot of fun. I'm really glad we were able to do that, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. You can find out information about my book, Don't Ask Permission to Fly, on annagouker.com. Also, for a list of podcasts I like listening to regularly, we have details in the show notes of this episode. All episodes of Lead the Way can be found on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and make sure to rate and review when you subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Special thanks to Buzz Kemper for his voiceover artistry in the opening. This episode was brought to you by the time and talent of Tyler Willenbrink, Katie Seamack, and Jeremy Van Mill. I'm Anna Gouker. Until next time.